Welcome, everybody. This is George Veeder, Veeder Financial. Looking forward to talking to you today in this video blog about where we're at in the economy based on where I sit, and then what we can expect over the next quarter based on historical patterns with what's going on in the world, so that you know exactly where I'm at. And then also a little bit of food for thought that might help us live a more productive and happier life based on my experiences. First of all, we have a birthday that I want to recognize. Warren Buffett turned 93 yesterday. Isn't that amazing? 93 years old and still considered arguably the greatest financier in the world. So that shows you if you have a purpose every day to live for like he does, he feels like what he does is extremely important for the world, even though he doesn't probably eat a diet that any nutritionist would tell you would give you a longevity. He loves hamburgers and junk food, and he eats that stuff every day. But he's 93 and as sharp as he's ever been because of his purpose in life. So I think that's something that we all can think about. Okay, stepping back to the economy. This has been a wonderful year so far. We're over halfway through now. We're deeply engaged into the third quarter, which historically is the weakest for stocks. But a moderate portfolio, a mix of stocks and bonds is going to be somewhere between 7 and 10% since the first of the year. So we've had a really solid period up until now and a phenomenal recovery based on the October lows that we bounced off of. Now, a couple of statistics. The Federal Reserve raised rates in July. The next meeting in September, according to Jerome Powell, the pause is on the table. So nobody's expecting a rate increase, or the analyst community is not expecting a rate increase in September. If we got adverse data where inflation heated up, he's holding out that possibility maybe towards the end of the year in November perhaps that we get another quarter point bump. But most economists feel like there's less than 50% chance that we're going to have more rate increases. So to capsulize that, let's just say we're at or near the top of this tightening cycle. I'll quote, I read an article this morning by the Atlanta Fed governor, and he said in relationship to inflation data, but he said, I feel policy is appropriately restrictive now and doesn't see rate increases. The data would support his viewpoint. We just got in the Fed's favorite gauge for inflation, consumer price index, and we are up in the last 12 months 3.4%. So that's still higher than the Fed target of 2%, but a year ago we were 8.4. So you see the trajectory of interest rates are going right towards where the Fed wants them to go. We had jobless claims come in at over 200,000, but less than people expected. So the economy has dealt with this tightening cycle better than anybody anticipated. We have consumer spending that stayed extremely strong, but consider it, the way that we can interpret news is all over the place. We can interpret the same statistic negatively or positive. So when we think about inflation, the negative, of course, is going to the grocery store and things that you're used to buying cost more, and that nobody likes that feeling. But what about wage inflation? We've had a super tight employment market. That means if you're a UPS driver, you're starting at $100,000 as a UPS driver. So that's where a lot of this consumer spending that we see everywhere has been coming from. The positive benefit of wage inflation for middle America. People have money to spend because they're making more money than they ever have. I'm not saying, you might say, well, I'm not. I'm just saying in general, that's been the trend because of a tight labor market and forced inflationary pressure on wages and incomes. So that's given more money in people's pockets to spend, and that's why consumer spending has surprised everybody to the upside up until now. The other thing I just want to mention, besides inflation data going our way and consumer spending continuing to stay strong, is that we've had corporate earnings that have just been phenomenally good. We just had the second quarter earnings that started in July and were finished in August reported, and we had over an 80% beat rate. So 8 out of 10 companies did better than what they had forecasted they would do in the April quarter or in the January quarter. So that's not what we were expecting either. Wage earnings growth is not at all-time highs. It's less than it was a couple of years ago, but not nearly what we thought it would be with what the Fed has done with the tightening policy. So it, again, has surprised to the upside. Now we will have our next earnings season in October for the third quarter, which typically just vaults us into the Christmas holiday spending spree because earnings start the second week of October for the third quarter, and that moves us in by the time they're dried up a month later. As far as the announcements, that puts us into consumer season. So historically, December's our best month on the S&P. November's our second best month. January's our third best month, and all that starts in October. You guys have heard me talk about that a lot. So we want to make sure if we have extra cash laying around that we make sure we put that in the market sometime towards the end of the third quarter. September is always my favorite month to make extra deposits into my position. So I've been gathering cash. I've been investing throughout the year personally. Obviously, I love what I do and I understand it. And so I've been taking advantage of this time where markets were discounted and getting as much in the market as I can. But I always build my cash reserve up so that I can deploy it in September and then get that best time of the year priced into my investment portfolio. So I encourage all of you to do the same. I've got a lot of people on my calendar to see in September because we've had that discussion. But if we haven't, please call our office and let's talk about what appropriate cash levels should be in the bank, and then what maybe we could add to investments to take advantage and leverage where we are in the historical cycle of stocks on the calendar, okay, which we're at the sweet spot for adding to our positions. Now, I want to mention, so anyway, I'm very optimistic about where we are in this economic cycle. We're starting new expansion. We're officially out of the bear market into a bull market, and this is the time when we will get rewarded for our patience in the bear market. And again, they don't happen all the time, but nobody likes them when they do. And ours was 2022. Psychologically, I'm constantly reading things and studying things that help me with how I frame where I'm at in any particular cycle in my life, whether I'm having a good moment in my health or a challenging moment in my health or a good moment in the market or a difficult moment in the market or a relationship good or difficult market. I have grounding things that I put in my brain. Now, I'm revisiting Think and Grow Rich, which was published in 1937. In his book, there are 13 principles that all these people followed. And the first chapter is on desire. First thing we need to do is decide exactly what we want. Most people don't. They drift through life without definitive goals of exactly what they want their best life to look like, or a better version of their life to look like. But we have to put that on paper, exactly what we want. So think about that, and if you don't know exactly what you want, that's your job, is to think about that and put something on paper, a better version of your current life that would make you happier and more fulfilled and more powerful to help others. So decide what you want, and then the price you're willing to pay, number 2, because there isn't any such thing as something that's great that doesn't cost something, right? There's a price to pay, and we become a better person as we pay that price. We become ready for whatever we want to realize by paying that price. We become that person that should have whatever it is that we want by paying that price. Hope that makes sense. So decide what you want, price you're willing to pay. Then you set a deadline, because you have to have some sense of urgency. If it's just out there, I'll do that someday, then you don't get up every day with a measured amount of progress you need to make. So putting a timeline on it creates sense of urgency, and then create your initial plan. Decide what you've got to do to get there. Put on paper what your plan is to accomplish your goal. You're going to revise your plan. It's not going to work. Nobody just has a plan that's perfect. People have an initial plan, or let's say a rough draft of their plan, and they move into that, and then they start figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what you need more of, what you should do less of. You figure out how you need to modify that plan. So then you modify it, and then you launch again. Then you modify it, and then you launch again. Winston Churchill, my favorite quote of his, was that the true meaning of success is to go from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Then the last thing is, after you have that plan, decide what you want, price you're willing to pay, deadline, your initial plan to accomplish it, then you need to make sure you've got it written down. It can't just be, an unwritten goal is a wish. It becomes finite when it's written down and studied. And then the last principle of goal setting is to rehearse that twice a day. I love the man in the mirror idea, where I look at myself in the mirror and I recite my goals in the mirror, where I'm looking at my eyeballs to eyeballs. And that does something to me. You can do it any way you want to, but revisit your plan twice a day. So that's the formula. I've got 2 quotes for you, because we've got to be determined. Things are never going to work the way we want them to work. We have to keep adjusting and moving forward, adjusting and moving forward. So it takes determination. Without determination, none of these principles work, right? Because we don't give them a chance to work without being tough enough to get from A to B. Okay, so first quote, Allan McGinnis McLoy. He said, "The different ways in which people react to failure is a motivational puzzle. What causes some to sail forth into the world with great promise and strong trajectory and then quit after only one defeat? Unable to rise from their failures, they scale down their dreams and live out their lives in cautious mediocrity. On the other hand, what allows others to be capable of endless renewal? Failure seems to make them only more determined to overcome. And when they stumble, they pick themselves up to learn from their mistake and go on to finish their race with distinction." Okay, so I've always loved that. Commit it to memory 20 years ago, rehearse it all the time to make sure I'm staying determined to keep overcoming the temporary failures along the way. The last one is from Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill said, "We who sit on the sideline of life see the overwhelmingly large number of people go down in defeat after one failure, never to rise again. We see, however, the few who take the punishment of defeat as an urge to greater effort, and to them go all of life's spoils." So let's make sure that we're staying properly optimistic about economic cycle. Remind ourselves again, I know it's a broken record, but every recession we've ever had was followed by a higher point in the market and recovery. And we've had 35 recessions since the Civil War. We've recovered 35 times. Bear markets, they're more frequent. We've had 13 since World War II, and we've moved to different highs in between every bear market. There's never not been a bull market after a bear market. Keep that in mind. That gives us what we need to stay positive if we're rational about that, okay? And then look forward to something. Always have something that you get out of bed and look forward to. It can be whatever you need to do in your life, no matter what stage of your life you're at. If you're breathing, you're not done, okay? You can be writing your memoirs for your family, doing genealogy to find out family members that you don't know about. You can be mastering a hobby. You can be exploring the world that God has given you through travel. There should be always something you're looking forward to. Put it on paper. Gosh, let's take advantage of the time we have here and be successful. Grateful, I know I've talked a lot, but grateful to have these moments with you, and God bless you, and enjoy the balance of your summer.